Wonderful. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Maria Tahir. I am the U.S. Executive Director and one of the co-founders of an organization called SEO, which works on the issue of female genital cutting or mutilation. And I'll talk a little bit more about SEO in just a little bit. But thank you again for joining us. And while we wait for others to join the meeting, we also want to welcome you all to introduce yourselves in the chat and maybe also share what you're interested in learning from us today or what brought you to today's training presentation. So feel free again to introduce yourselves, your name, your organization, maybe your location, and why you were interested in joining us. And for those who just joined, just another reminder that this training will be recorded and we will be sharing a link afterwards. So we will refer to this session as FGMC or FGC 101, which FGMC is short for female genital mutilation or cutting. And as this is an introductory training where we will be providing a general overview of FGMC, and we'll also be regarding definitions used to describe the practice, different justifications for the practice, its health impact, and its prevalence globally and domestically as well too. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge that not everyone who has undergone FGMC may identify as female. However, in this presentation, we may use gendered terminology to assist with providing some descriptions. Nonetheless, we believe it essential to emphasize that the experiences of survivors encompass a wide range of identities, which is an important consideration for us as individuals or as part of an organization to be mindful of and inclusive of in your approach with working with individuals impacted by FGMC. So for centuries, FGMC has remained largely a hidden or secretive practice, yet we know FGC or FGMC is a reality for many women and girls across different communities in the United States. FGC is a practice that is often imposed by women onto other women, and girls are generally encouraged to remain silent about what they have undergone. Therefore, silence is an inherent part of this type of gender-based violence. As is true for other forms of gender-based violence, such as domestic violence or sexual assault and so forth, FGMC can also lead to lifelong physical and emotional health consequences. And we'll go into more depth about that as well. And that is why we believe that at the core of providing better prevention, protection, health, and social services for women and girls, the need for stronger data, for research, and community-led and informed engagement is necessary. So with that in mind, I also want to reiterate that this is a heavy topic and we recognize that. So if at any time throughout the presentation you feel you need the moment to step away, to turn off your video, please feel free to do so and to take care of yourself in breaks if needed. All right, can we go to the next slide? So I want to just quickly go over our agenda for today. As some of you may know, so SEO, we have entered into a partnership with a few other organizations on a project to support Washington Department of Health regarding addressing and preventing FGMC throughout the state. And this training is linked to that project, but we also opened it up to the public as an opportunity for those interested in learning more about FGMC in general. So we will start with some introductions of our partner organizations, and then we will provide an overview of FGMC, looking again at some of the health impacts, and then briefly look into the global impact of FGMC, and then go in more depth about FGMC in the United States, including current legislation around the practice, and focusing in on what the impact of FGMC is in Washington State. Throughout the presentation, we will be sharing some videos as well from our digital storytelling project called Voices to End FGMC. And we think these videos are a great way to better understand the different experiences with FGC and the journey that survivors go through as part of their healing process. And I will say that we have done 8 workshops, I believe, at this time, but we have over 80 videos in that collection from individuals and survivors who have some sort of experience or impact on with FGMC. And so these stories are created from their own experiences and their own voices as well, too. They are not graphic, I'll mention that, but again, please take care of yourself as we recognize this is a heavy topic. Um, and then at the end, we also hope to facilitate room for conversation by creating a space for all of you to ask questions and reflect on the information shared today. And also just for logistics, please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. We will have a Q&A at the end where we hope to have some more audience interaction and have the opportunity for you all to come off of mute and ask your questions and or share in the chat box, however you are most comfortable doing so. Can we go to the next slide? So before we get started, we just have a few quick poll questions, and I see the poll was just launched. If folks could respond to this poll, it'll help us gauge just how familiar individuals are on this topic, and that helps us with better catering our training and the support that we'll be able to provide over the next year around this topic in Washington State. So we'll just keep it open for about a minute or two. And if you can fill it out, that would be wonderful. If you've just joined, there's a poll that's launched, and we would love for you to fill it out. It looks like about 50% or so have filled it out at this point. So we'll keep it open for just maybe another 30 seconds. Looks like we're close to 70% filling it out. I think we can probably close the poll at this time and we'll move forward. Thank you to everyone who filled it out for us. All right. And if we can also go to the next slide. Wonderful. So as we mentioned, and I know some people are already doing this, if you haven't already, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat box, maybe your name, your organization, your location, and what brought you to our training today, that would be wonderful. And please feel free to continue to interact via the chat box throughout our presentation today, including any questions that you might have. As I mentioned, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session, and we hope to be able to address some of those questions and comments. All right. So now, just for a quick brief background on the partner organizations, and then also I hope to share just a little bit about the overall project we're engaged in. We're going to move forward with that. Um, So we wanted to introduce you to the facilitators for today's webinar. And again, my name is Maria Tyre. I'm the co-founder of SEO. We also on our team have Arias, who is part of SEO, Caitlin, and Esatu, who are part of the US Network 10 FGMC. If anyone is interested in learning more about the training providers, there is a document that we will be putting in the chat box and also where you can learn more about project partners too. And I think that will be shared. Wonderful. And if we can just move on to the next slide. Yes, for SEO. Perfect. So to talk a little bit about SEO, our mission is to empower Asian and other communities to end female genital cutting and create positive social change through dialogue, education, and collaboration based on community involvement. SEO formed in 2015 as an advocacy collective of South Asian and other survivors of female genital cutting, also known again as female genital mutilation, to address the lack of acknowledgement of FGC as gender-based violence and child abuse impacting U.S. women. SEO works to empower underrepresented communities to advocate for their inclusion within FGC discourse and support them to create systemic change to end this centuries-long practice. And we utilize collaborative grassroots campaigns and storytelling techniques to train communities to lead this change. We also partner with frontline workers, such as healthcare providers, to create culturally sensitive systems that care for survivors, and we work with government to address policy level change. Also, just for context, Seo is the Bora Gujarati word for Sahelio, or friends, in specific female friends, which reflects our organization's mission to engage in dialogue with the community to find a collective solution towards ending FGMC. With that, we can go to the next slide, and I'd like to introduce our partner agency, the U.S. Network to End FGMC, and then after that, also our partner organization, Mother Africa. So, Caitlin, if you would like to introduce the U.S. Network.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Caitlin LeMay. I'm the director of the U.S. and FGMC Network. So we are a collaborative group of over 200 individuals and organizations. We're really a diverse group of survivors, civil society organizations, foundations, activists, policymakers, researchers, healthcare providers, really anybody and everybody who is working towards ending FGMC and supporting survivors of FGMC, mostly in the United States, but we also have some international members as well. So our work is really, as our name suggests, we are working to end FGMC in the United States. And again, we also do a little bit of global work, but our focus is on the United States specifically. So we really serve as the main source for information and the lead advocacy voice as well in the United States. And so we do that in a couple different ways. One is through movement building, which is mostly through our membership base. So really supporting our members, sharing resources, amplifying the work of our members, which are mostly grassroots community-based organizations, and just lifting up the work that they're doing and really fostering this community of collaboration rather than competing against each other. Because we firmly believe that we're all working towards the same goal, right, of ending FGMC. So how can we work together towards that goal rather than competing against each other? So that first part of our work is movement building.
I
And
don't seem
then
to be hearing anything that you are presenting. I don't know what's the problem.
Oh, can others hear me?
I
Yeah,
can hear anybody.
maybe someone from our team could message Mamudo.
Great. Okay. I'll continue then. The other piece to our work is training and technical assistance. So doing trainings like this for our members, but also external folks as well, the federal government, healthcare providers, social workers. And then the third piece is around policy advocacy. So making sure that we have laws that are being passed, such as in Washington state, but also making sure that those laws are actually being implemented and strengthened, both on the state and the federal level. So that's a little bit about us. With that being said, I will pass it on to Rishu, who will talk about the work being done at Mother Africa.
Thank you, Caitlin, and welcome everyone. My name is Rachel Sapano. I'm the founder and executive director of Mother Africa. The mission of Mother Africa is to support African refugees and immigrant women and their families to reach their highest potential. And we are committed to leadership building and advocacy, as well as supporting the community to navigate and overcome barriers related, for example, to accessing healthcare, education, and economic independence. The communities we serve come from over 22 countries in Africa and the Middle East. And they speak multiple languages such as Arabic, French, Swahili, Dari, Amharic, Tigrinya, Mai, and many others. And we offer culturally responsive programming to our communities for all age groups, from babies to seniors. And these programs are are co-designed also by the communities we serve, and include raising awareness for example, in gender-based violence like FGMC, mental health, and domestic violence, as well as infant mortality prevention, and supporting the screening of children under the age of 5 for their developmental screening for children under the age of 5, as well as educating our community about financial literacy and digital literacy, and healthy homes, and healthy water, and environment around them. Our staff connect also community to existing resources and offer case management, advocacy, and support to meet basic needs. And you can check our website or follow us on social media to learn more about the activities that we do every day. Thank you so much, and back to Maria.
Thank you, Risho. If we can go to the next slide. So I just briefly wanted to mention the legislation, the bill, Senate Bill 5453, which was passed into law in Washington State in April 2023. And this legislation, as you can see on the PowerPoint, was passed to strengthen efforts against FGMC, and it mandates that the Washington State Department of Health take proactive steps in education, partnership development, and healthcare provider training to prevent FGMC and support survivors. And that is also what is part of this project that Mother Africa, SAO, and US Network have entered into with the Washington State Department of Health. In terms of the bill, just a general overview, there are a few key provisions to be aware of. This law now allows for the rights for survivors and their families to seek various civil remedies. It does have criminal penalties for cutters. It also has penalties for medical practitioners who may be continuing FGMC. And again, as mentioned, it does include outreach and education. And I think that's all I will share at this point in time. If folks are interested in learning more about the specific legislation that was passed, perhaps we can share a link to it in the chat box and put it in the email that we're going to be sending out afterwards. And then with that in mind, if we can go to, we're at the next slide, and I'm going to pass it over to Arias.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. So just to start off and to help provide some clarity, since there are several different terms used with the practice, we can go ahead and go on to the next slide as well. Some terms that you might be more familiar with or have heard through your work. So for this presentation, you'll hear us use FGMC, or you might also hear us use FGC. FGC stands for female genital cutting. But other commonly used terms in the field are female genital mutilation, or FGM. You might hear female circumcision. And then there are also other cultural-based terms such as katna, sunna, and bondo. And that's just to list a few, but it's really just so that you know that in general, they're kind of referring to the same harmful practice of FGMC. But for a kind of best practice when you are working with individuals or communities that practice FGC, it's ideal to use the term that they are using. So if, for example, if someone is using the term FGC, then you in return would also use the term FGC, or if they're referring to the practice as FGM, then you would use the term FGM. And yeah, that's just to help provide some clarity if you hear us using different terms. We can go ahead and go on to the next slide as well. And so before further diving into the content, we wanted to start off with this question to better understand what experience folks have with this issue. So you're welcome to respond in the chat, or you can also use the thumbs up feature if you would like. And the question is just, have you met someone or know someone who might have experienced FGMC? So we'll just take a brief moment here just to gauge some familiarity on this issue. It's okay too, I guess, if you don't feel comfortable sharing at the moment. So we can also go to the next slide. And I think maybe if people are still having some tech issues, someone from the team might be able to reach out just in case. So yeah, thank you all for answering the previous question. And to ensure that we're all on the same page with our understanding of what FGMC might encompass, we're going to share here the World Health Organization's definition, and that is FGMC refers to the partial or total removal of the female-assigned external genitalia or other injury to the female-assigned external genitalia organs for non-medical reasons. So with this, the fact that WHO has a definition for what FGMC is kind of shows that there is international recognition around this topic, and particularly as a form of human rights violation and an extreme form of violence against women and girls. And this is also just noting that this is a practice that generally occurs on minor girls anywhere from birth to puberty, and also in some circumstances it can occur to adult women. And we can go to the next slide. And this is just going to show a visual representation of the different types of FGMC. This is also what WHO has outlined as some of the major categories of FGC. There are 4 major categories, but here we're showing the 3 most common ones that we have seen. So type 1 involves the removal of the clitoral hood with or without removal of part or all of the clitoris. We have type 2, which is the partial or total removal of the clitoris and the labia minora with or without the removal of the labia majora. And then type 3 is one of the more invasive types of FGMC, which is also referred to as infibulation. And this is the narrowing of the vaginal orifice, usually by creating a seal that allows for urination and a menstrual period to go through. And this often involves cutting or repositioning the labia minora, the labia majora, and also sometimes the clitoris as well. And so as you can tell, the categories, they sort of range from least severe to the most severe. And then just to comment on what type 4 FGMC is, this is often referred to as the other category. So this can oftentimes include pricking, piercing, cauterizing, and other manipulations to the female genital organs. But just to note that FGMC is not a standardized practice or anything. So these are just kind of broad categories for the types of FGC that have been documented, and also the severity and the trauma related to undergoing the practice really varies from person to person and their individual experience. So this is just kind of to capture what has been noted and what individuals might have experienced. And yeah, with that, we can go on to the next slide. And here we're going to look at some of the physical health impacts. And again, just a reminder that FGMC does not have any health benefits, and that's why it is often referred to as medically unnecessary. And for the physical impacts of FGC, we know that it ranges from short or long-term health issues. And again, it varies from person to person. So some folks may experience none of these health impacts, and others might experience multiple. So I would also like to preface that this is not an exhaustive list. There are many other potential consequences that are not being outlined here. But for some of the short-term complications of FGC, we might see hemorrhage, difficulty urinating and menstruating, and some urinary tract infections as well. And that, again, that's just to name a few. Some of the chronic or long-term issues can include cyst formation, sexual dysfunction, infertility, and complications in childbirth, such as the inability to deliver vaginally. As mentioned, type 3 FGMC involves a procedure known as infibulation. So in order to deliver a childbirth vaginally, this might result in a procedure known as deinfibulation. So that's the reopening of the vaginal seal. So oftentimes you'll see that more invasive or surgical procedures are needed to respond to some of these physical impacts. But despite the potential consequences that we have just mentioned, it is not unusual for women to feel that their experience with FGC was not harmful to them. And a part of that is due to the fact that FGC, as mentioned, is performed during birth and puberty. So oftentimes women might be unaware of the connection between their health issues and FGC. And that's just something to keep in mind, because as well, survivors might be dealing with some of the suppressed memories of their experiences, or they might also be barely in the process of learning that they have undergone FGC. And then on our next slide, we wanted to show here our first Voices story. This is called Not Medicine by Anonymous. And again, just a brief trigger warning, and we encourage everyone to comment or share any reflections on the videos we are sharing in the chat box. So we can go ahead and start it.
I was 18, and I was having my first pap smear. A pap smear is never really something to look forward to, but this was stepping over my boundaries and resurfacing everything I had worked so hard to forget. Hesitant at first, I eased into the vulnerable state, uncomfortable for anyone to be in. Trusting the stranger to examine my deepest, most private parts, reminders of my painful childhood. As she felt around the outside of my vagina, she said, "What is this?" At first, she naively stroked my lesion, but then her touch became invasive. It did not feel like medicine anymore. Her touch paired with the curious tone of her voice that expressed both concern and ignorance sent shivers down my spine. I thought, she now knows. I wondered, will these feelings resurface every time I undress before I doctor? Every time I decide to tell someone I'm getting close to about what happened to me? Every time I share my body with a lover? I have not had a pap smear since. I should not have to face these questions. No woman should.
Again, we encourage everyone to share any reflections that they might have related to this video. And we really just wanted to share this story because it shows the direct implications that a negative experience with a healthcare provider can have on one's healthcare seeking behavior and overall their ability to receive quality care. So with providers not being able to recognize or appropriately address the physical and emotional consequences of FGC, this is not uncommon at all. And this storyteller's experience with the gynecologist is reflective of that lack of training and cultural sensitivity that we see in the healthcare system. And with that, we can go on to the next slide. I think you may need to click on it one more time. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So while there are still challenges with providers overlooking the physical impacts of FGC, really little attention has been given to discuss and understand some of the psychological consequences that might arise. So some of these issues can include poor sleep, fatigue, generalized body pain, limitations in daily activities, poor self-perceived well-being, and outlined here on the slide too are some potential mental health issues that might come up, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, highlighted by experiences with nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety. As well, we have depression, which might be associated with feelings of guilt, shame, sadness, and poor body image. And again, it's just important to recognize that not all survivors are going to have some of the same experiences. And so, we know that trauma can manifest differently in individuals, especially considering some of the diverse circumstances around what their experience was undergoing FGC. But I will say that in general, in the field of FGMC, recognition on the long-term mental health effects has gained a bit more attention in recent years. And this next slide that we're going to pull up is another digital story, which is called Behind the Wall by Isatu Jwalo. And the story really speaks for itself. So I want to just encourage everyone to share any reflections in the chat box.
One day, I heard drumming in our compound. People were dancing, they had painted their faces white, and they were singing. I had never heard the song before, and I was curious. When I came closer to the circle, I saw my sister sitting blindfolded in the middle with other girls. Then someone grabbed me and put me next to her. We were carried to the outskirts of Bakau, where there was a roofless shack. Then one by one, they started taking each girl inside, and after several minutes of screaming, they carried her back outside. What was going on behind the wall? When my turn came, 4 people held me down, 1 on each limb. Auntie Mena made 3 big cuts. I was 8 years old, and I knew something had been removed. They put herbs on my wounds, and we wore loose gowns throughout the slow healing process. Some people justify FGMC by saying it is part of Islam, but there are ethnic groups who are Muslims and don't cut their girls. My mother is Wolof, and they do not practice FGM. Women who are not cut are called Solima, uncut. They are considered promiscuous. I started getting infections, but I didn't understand why. Years later, when my leg needed to be amputated, doctors needed to put a catheter in me and couldn't. Only then did I find out that what had happened to me was type 3 FGMC. In order to put the catheter in, they had to perform defibrillation to open me up. I felt like I was less than, both physically and mentally. I struggled with depression. I was diagnosed with vaginismus, and when I got married, I had to go through pelvic floor therapy. I didn't feel like a woman at all. But gradually, I learned I could heal some of my pain. I met with doctors and therapists and slowly changed how I viewed my body. In 2017, I got a clitoral restoration surgery. I started advocating more for an end to FGMC. Today, I still work on my healing, but many of my younger cousins have been spared.
Na Mariama, Mariama, na Mariama, Sibo Mariama, din dole baloba sina bambaina o señoro, fenke señoro, fenke watoitam so buludala.
As mentioned, feel free to share any thoughts here in the chat, and then we can also go on to the next video, which also reflects on some of the mental health impacts that individuals might experience.
When I think about who I am, where I've been, I think of you too. There is so much I wish I could say. Remember when we were little, the plays that we would do, dressing up in whatever we could find. You always cast my doll in our family plays, knowing that my baby bottoms was my favorite. My doll was with us when we boarded that plane. As we flew through the clouds, I said, "Look, we get to be like birds today." We laughed so much. You said, "This has been one of my best days." The next morning, Baby Bottoms was with me when I was led down the basement stairs. I held her tight as I was put on the cold metal table. Later, I saw her on the dirt floor with my blood on her dress. I could never play with her again. She knew my shame. You knew it too. Why wasn't it something we could share? Did you have the same confusion and pain that I felt every day? Did you get in trouble in school for going to the bathroom too often or taking too long? I already had 5 kids when my new obstetrician asked, "What happened to you?" Did anyone ever ask you? Did you ever wonder why God made it a sin for girls to share? Did you learn you were different in human anatomy class too? After it happened, I heard you scream in the night sometimes. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that what was done to us invaded my dreams too. I'm sorry you never got to share your story. I miss you every day. Keep dancing, sister. Keep being free.
So again, feel free to share any thoughts that come up to you in the chat. And what we learned about what happened to Jenny and her sister, I think really contradicts the assumptions that society might make about who is impacted by FGMC. And so how she highlights in her story, I think really creates the stigmatizing situation where one feels that they can't really speak out loud about what they have experienced, and that can really impact individuals differently. And really just highlighting how global FGC can be, and the different individuals that might be impacted is what we like to highlight here. And also a note to provide a bit more description. I believe Jenny's story comes from a fundamentalist Christian background. So if you're interested in learning more information about that, you're welcome to reach out to us, and we can share more about the different pockets of individuals that we've seen impacted by FGC.
Can I ask a quick question here?
I think just so we can get through the content a bit, I would like to keep going, but if you want to share it in the chat, I think someone from the team can reach out to you.
Okay.
Just because we have a lot to go over, but
No,
if you're
I fully
okay.
understand. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
got
so
it.
much.
No problem.
And so yeah, we'll go on to our next slide. To look at the different justifications that we might see in connection to FGC. FGC is a deeply ingrained social norm in the cultural and social fabrics of many communities. So it is something that we see that has endured for generations. And there are several justifications for its continuation. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some that we have noted, and some that we see that might be a bit more common than others. But one is controlling sexuality, and it is believed that FGC might be able to curb one's sexual desire to prevent any promiscuous behavior. In some cultures, FGC is thought to improve one's marriageability as well, kind of contributing to the thought of chastity and purity as well. In some communities, there is support from religious leaders to continue the practice. And in others, there are various perceived health benefits, some related to the cleanliness and perceived hygiene of performing FGMC. And others believe that it can enhance one's appearance of their genitalia, or that it'll enhance sexual pleasure. And as mentioned, these are just a few. There are several other diverse contexts, specific reasons for why FGMC might be practiced. And one important note to make is that the reason FGC is performed can also shift over time in a community. And one example that I can provide is that within the Bora community, the Dawudi Bora community in India, where we've seen FGC being practiced, one of the central ideas of why FGC was performed was that it was the idea that women were not supposed to be sexual. They were not really supposed to express themselves sexually. So we've seen over time that religious authorities from the Bora community tend to promote the idea that FGC is more of a religious requirement now, over the idea that women are not supposed to be sexual. So just to note that these ideas can also change and shift over time. But again, regardless of the reasons that might be given, FGC is a social norm. So oftentimes there can be this immense social pressure to conform to continuing this practice, making it challenging for individuals and families to try to break away from it. And yeah, with that being said, I think I'm now going to pass it on to Aissatou to reflect on the global impact of FGC.
Thank you, Iris. So just by from watching Jenny's video, that shows that FGM is really a global issue. And many people don't normally associate FGMC as being a global issue. And there is this misconception that it is only practiced in African countries or amongst African diaspora communities. So as a consequence, not enough nationally representative data is available for these countries to better inform or support activists' efforts to end FGMC. We will look at the global data on the next slide. Next slide, please. So we want to take a moment to emphasize that FGMC is a global issue. Really, only in the last few years has the United Nations recognized FGMC as an international public health issue. So in 2020, a report conducted by 3 organizations shown at the bottom of the map below revealed that FGMC can be found in at least 92 countries around the world. However, according to a newly released UNICEF report, the global figure is 230 million women and girls, and this accounts for only about 32 countries, primarily in Africa and the Middle East. The updated global estimates show a 15% increase in the total number of survivors compared to data released 8 years ago, which estimated 200 million girls and women had undergone FGMC. This limitation in data collection in part is as a result of international policies, such as the Millennium Development Goals, which only required what they considered relevant countries, in code, to collect data. There was a lot of advocacy from those working in the field of FGMC to have that policy change. And in 2015, with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all countries were required to report on FGMC. So regrettably, for countless women and girls residing in regions not initially considered relevant, this meant enduring the hardships of FGMC without international recognition or support. Additionally, some of the tools and methods used to collect data, including general silence around this issue, led us to believe that current estimates do not accurately portray the number of women and girls affected or affected or at risk of FGMC. So we will share a link in the chat with the UNICEF report that was done in that was done in 2024. The current UNICEF report. Next slide, please. So we will watch another voice video on being a non-binary survivor of GMC by Dana, which is the story of someone who isn't traditionally included in the global estimates of FGMC we have today. So we will go ahead and watch the video, and please share your reactions or any reflection you might have in the chat.
As of 2020, estimates are that at least 200 million women and girls have experienced female genital mutilation. This statistic makes me question if I, a trans non-binary survivor of FGM, am real. From language to resources, all aspects of FGM, the before, during, and after, assume an FGM survivor has and always will be a cis woman. I came out as non-binary around the same time I talked openly about my experiences as an FGM survivor through my poetry. At one reading, a woman snapped her fingers and hummed at me when I introduced myself as trans non-binary. She later cried over my shoulder, calling me a powerful woman. At another event, I shared with the organizers that I didn't know if I fit into the gender statistic they planned to open with because I am trans non-binary. They introduced me to a crowded room as one of 200 million girls. I know that when I hear the pronouns she or her, it's my cue to act like a woman. She is asked about future birthing complications as a mother. She is attached to the same statistic that denies me of my personhood. At one point in my life, I convinced myself that she, her was a reclamation of the girl who died on the metal table when I was cut, an assurance that she survived along with me. But the truth is, sometimes she can feel like a white flag, an exasperated sigh after a person calls me a strong lady, an uncomfortable silence when my friends call me a girl when naming what happened to me. I constantly remind myself that out of all the people who attempt to call me things I am not, I'm the only one who knows what happened to me. I was in that room. I was the one left with the blood that spilled. I was the one who saw a life that would be more than this pain.
So we decided to show this video because we believe it offers a unique and essential perspective on FGMC, ultimately challenging the traditional narrative and assumptions about FGMC survivors, highlighting how experiences can differ based on intersecting identities. Again, this goes on to show that FGMC is a global issue and it is a global concern and that it happens everywhere in the world. So on that note, I will pass it on to Caitlin to give FGMC in the United States. Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Isa2. So now I want to bring us closer to home and talk more about FGMC in the US specifically, and then we'll get even closer to home and talk about Washington State specifically. Because I also want to recognize that it's that this is a practice that happens right here in the United States, and it does happen in Washington State. And this is a practice that happens in both diaspora communities as well as certain non-migrant communities as well. So we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. So if we can go to the next slide. So current estimates right now, according to a 2012 study by the CDC, estimates that over 500,000 women and girls in the US had FGMC performed on them or are at risk of FGMC. So this is a really important finding as it indicates a threefold increase from a 1997 estimate. However, this estimate does not factor in those who were born in the United States, such as second and third generation migrants who have undergone FGMC. As I'm sure you all have picked up so far, data is a huge challenge for us around FGMC, and it's one area that we struggle with, and that we don't really have really great accurate data around FGMC. And the US is no different around that. So because of that, this number, around 500,000 women and girls in the United States, is most likely an underrepresentation of the population at risk. So nonetheless, the states who are highlighted in dark orange on that map there, the map on the left specifically, are identified as having more than 25,000 women and girls at risk for FGMC. So more than 25,000 women and girls at risk. As you can see, Washington State is one of those. The map on the right shows the 41 states that have passed laws against FGMC, many of which were passed in the last 5 years, with the most recent law being passed last year by Washington State. So that's why we have a cute little heart on it, because Washington State is the most recent one. So that was signed into law last year, last April, by Governor Inslee. And so the provisions of these laws, it's important to note, vary greatly by each state. Only a few, less than 10, have provisions that require local community education and outreach programs regarding FGMC. And of those 41 states, very few have actually implemented those provisions. So all of that to say, policy and legislation on FGMC is not, for lack of a better word, sophisticated in the United States at all, as it is for other forms of gender-based violence. So we've got a lot of work to do in the United States as far as legislation. And with Washington State having this new law, we're really hoping that Washington State could really kind of set the bar for other states, and really setting an example. So that's what we're really hoping to see here. So if we can go to the next slide, to further shed light on this issue in the United States and the legal landscape, I want to talk a little bit about federal legislation, because it actually closely relates to state legislation as well. And particularly around funding and support services in the United States to support survivors of FGMC, which, spoiler alert, there are very little. So here's sort of a timeline and a snapshot of the legal landscape. So in 1996, the US Congress passed a federal law which criminalized FGMC, which made it illegal to practice in the United States. So fast forward a few years, in 2013, an important amendment was made to that 1996 law, which included the prohibition of travel cutting or vacation cutting, where individuals might take girls overseas to undergo FGMC. So we saw that a little bit in Jenny's video where she talked about being on an airplane and Jenny was actually taken out of the country to be cut. And so that's called either travel cutting or vacation cutting. And so in 2013, there was an amendment to the federal law to ban or prohibit vacation cutting. And then 4 years later, there was the first ever federal prosecution under this law. And this was the case of US versus Nagarwala, where a US doctor based in Detroit, Michigan, was charged with performing FGMC on a total of 9 young girls from Detroit, but also neighboring states as well. So again, this is a US-based doctor who was performing in a health clinic. And then the next year, so the charges were placed in 2017, and then the following year, as the case proceeded through the court system, a US District Court judge ruled, this was a complicated case, but the court decision ruled that the 1996 federal law was not within Congress's authority. They never had the authority, according to this judge, to pass that law, suggesting that FGMC instead should be regulated at the state level. This judge admitted that FGMC was a harmful practice and should not be done, but said that it should be regulated at the state level instead. So essentially, the federal law was ruled unconstitutional in 2018. So this was a devastating blow to FGMC advocates. And then there was an attempt to appeal that decision, and that was denied in 2019. In 2021, we fortunately were able to get a new law passed called the Stop FGM Act. So there is a federal law in place that prohibits FGMC. So what's important about that case, though, is when that judge said that that FGMC should be left up to the states, that put a lot of pressure on the states to pass their own state laws to prohibit FGMC. And so that's why earlier when I said that, when we looked at the last map, when I said that a lot of those state laws were passed within the past 5 years, that's why. Because that federal judge made that statement and the federal law was ruled unconstitutional. And so these states scrambled to pass their own state laws to protect women and girls. And so that was really important for the states to step up in those cases. And so, yes, we have this federal law in place as well. And it's also important to know that state laws play their own part, right? Because there are gaps in federal laws, and federal laws can't always, particularly around education and outreach pieces, those fall on the states. And there are particular provisions that are important for states to take on, and that they can do more work around. So we wanted to make sure to provide some of that history to show how the federal legislation has really impacted states and their passing of legislation as well. And then just another note, there was another federal prosecution in 2021. Unfortunately, that's been dismissed since. And so there actually have never been any successful federal prosecutions of FGMC. There have been a couple state prosecutions, but no successful federal prosecutions. So knowing these current laws are in place will really allow you to raise awareness to the general public or inform individuals about their legal rights, aiding in the prevention of FGMC and supporting survivors, because the state laws and the federal laws can work together. And so I think we could put a link in the chat as well if you want to learn more about the new law as well. So we have another video to share, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Washington State specifically as well. This video is from Miriam Safi as well.
It was a lazy, sunny day in Seattle. I was visiting my niece. She was 7 years old, the same age I was when I was cut. I remembered the emerald green carpet, the jumbo-sized Toblerone my aunt gave me as a bribe. She led me to her basement clinic in India. It was just the two of us, and without warning, she laid me on my back, she spread my legs apart, and I blacked out. When it was over, I sat in a corner with the candy bar, feeling sick to my stomach. I saw my aunt sitting with my cousin laughing and pointing at me. When I confronted my parents years later, they were furious. I learned she did this without their consent. Watching my niece reminded me of the me before I was cut. So confident, so self-assured. In that moment, I felt a wave of emotions. Gratitude she would never experience what I went through, and motivation to act. My father told me, the only way to spark change is to speak up. I worried all of my other identities would be erased. Painter, binge traveler, US diplomat, and proud Texan. When people Google searched my name, would this squeamish acronym be the only thing that would pop up? I eventually allowed my story to be published in The Guardian. It sparked a conversation within my community and even within my own family. My brother was with me that summer, and earlier this year, he launched a campaign to push legislators in Washington state to ban FGM. He wasn't able to protect me from my aunt, but his voice has the potential to break future cycles of violence.
So, as with the other videos, please feel free to put any thoughts or reactions in the chat. But Miriam's story really touches on the relationship dynamics within the speaker's family and community. And it also how the speaker's voice and actions brought about social change and inspired political advocacy right here in Washington. So that's why we really wanted to lift up Miriam's story. Which is a great segue about talking about FGMC in Washington state specifically. Because as I mentioned earlier, Washington was one of those states that had more than 25,000 people at risk, according to one of the studies. And according to the CDC study. We wanted to share some data from another study as well. This is a newer study that is from a different data set. And so we wanted to provide this information as well. So the data I'm sharing on this slide is from a researcher named Sean Callahan. So both SAO and the US Network have collaborated with Sean for a number of years now. And he's been engaged with a project that's looking at FGMC expansively across the United States specifically, and is using data from the American Community Survey from 2015 to 2019. And he's been working on estimating the impact of FGMC in each state. So for Washington, he focused on a study population of 44,761. And these were women and girls that had ancestral ties to countries where FGMC is practiced. So estimating just over 16,000 women and girls were living with FGMC, and almost 2,000 girls who were likely at risk. So again, over 16,000 women and girls who are already living with FGMC, and nearly 2,000 girls who were likely at risk of undergoing FGMC. So based on this figure, Washington state actually ranks within the highest category with regards to FGMC prevalence within the United States. So that's really important to know. And it was found that most of those impacted by FGMC in Washington live in the greater Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, and Portland, Vancouver, Hillsborough metropolitan areas. So we can go to the next slide. And so this breaks it down a little bit further. And so over 60% of the impacted population in the state identify as Ethiopian, Somali, and Eritrean. And so if you recall earlier, Arias talked about the different types of FGMC. In Washington state specifically, it's estimated that over 4,000 women were living with type 3 FGMC specifically. And so there's a screenshot of type 3 specifically, which is the most invasive type, as a reminder. And so again, while all survivors may require some level of medical and mental health support, those living with type 3 would likely require additional medical attention. And so that's, again, really important to know for this project, because not only do we need to talk about education and outreach, but we also need to talk about level of support for survivors, especially knowing what type of FGMC is most common in Washington state specifically. And finally, looking at the age distribution of girls most likely to be at risk. Again, we're talking about that group of nearly 2,000 girls at risk of FGMC. We see that elementary school age and younger were at greater risk. And that's followed by middle and high school age groups as well. So elementary school age and younger are the most at risk in Washington state specifically. So again, just as a reminder, we've mentioned this a few times throughout the training, but these figures do not include non-migrant communities here in the United States, right? So this data is limited, just like all the other data that we've presented on so far. So thinking back to the Voices video that we watched with Jenny, we know there are some cultural groups originating from the United States that also practice FGMC, but are not accounted for here in this data set. So these numbers are underrepresented, right? And so there are other communities that are practicing FGMC that are not included in this data set. So that's important to know as well. However, this data does help reinforce where targeted assistance and community outreach might be prioritized. Before we start to wrap up, I do just want to share one more video again, they all sort of speak for themselves, but it really is help tie everything together and will really uplift what brought all of these great partners, SAO, the US Network, Mother Africa, the Department of Health, what brought us all together here today and really got this project all started. So if we can play the video, and please share your reactions in the chat.
I was so happy when you were born, but then I remembered you were a girl. When I was your age, I wondered, why did no one protect me? I want you to know that I tried to protect you. I want to tell you a story about my scar. It happened when I was 6 years old. My parents told me I was going to my dad's village. When we arrived, my grandmother said, "We are all going to a banana plantation." The next day, there was singing and dancing, and for a while I was happy, until I was abruptly snatched from the crowd, taken into a hut, laid on the ground, and cut. No banana plantation. Everything had been a lie. I felt deceived. I had been sent there just for FGMC. As the wound healed into a scar, a lot changed. I was no longer interested in playing with my siblings. I blamed my mom for what happened, even though it was my dad's side of the family. But my dad just said, "It's a woman thing. I have no say in it." More than a decade later, I started asking questions. My mom said, "It was best for you girls because it keeps you virgins until you are married." I told her more than half of the girls I went into the bush with had kids out of wedlock. When I got pregnant myself, instead of thinking about whether I'd have a healthy baby, I worried what would happen if I had a girl. "We would only cut her just a little," family members said. I said, "No, don't even try to get this done." I now am not afraid to talk in public about stopping FGMC. I joined a coalition in Washington state working to pass a law against it. If there had been laws when I was a child, things would be different. I was able to convince another family member not to have her girls cut. but I wasn't able to convince your mother. All I think is that I failed you. I wish I didn't have the scar. I wish you didn't have one either. But we don't have to be silent about it.
So Ami was part of the Washington Coalition and helped to testify and advocate for the Washington law that got passed. And so it's thanks to survivors that came forward and shared their stories and testified that is why Washington State has a law. And so we really have to give credit to the survivors who were willing to share their stories and put themselves out there. So I'm appreciative that we have this video to be able to share. Yeah, so I just wanted to wrap up with that. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Stu.
Thank you, Caitlin. Ami's last phrase, we don't have to be silent about it, is very powerful. We owe it to those girls and women who are at risk of going through FGMC. We all have a moral obligation to say no to FGMC. So we'll quickly dive into, we know this is a lot of information and may take a whole while to process. Change often begins with awareness and understanding. So we thank you for taking part in this training, and we wanted to make space to engage further in these conversations with you all. So first, we'll open the room to see if anyone has any questions. If nothing comes in mind yet, we have come up with a few questions to make connections between what you all know about GBV and now know about female genital mutilation or cutting. Given that many skills you all have now are transferable when engaging with survivors of FGMC. So to start us off, what similarities do you notice between FGMC and other forms of GBV? So we will put these questions in the chat, but we'll also go through the chat, or if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and we can discuss further. So we'll put the questions in the chat, and also you can also put questions in the chat or unmute yourself to ask questions or contribute. Thank you.
And Neelam, I see you have a hand raised.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. Firstly, thank you so much for this presentation. It was so insightful, enlightening, and hearing the experiences of survivors of FGMC, really sort of brought it to life in a sense. In answer to your question about the similarities between FGMC and existing work, I work with API Chaya serving survivors of gender-based violence, and, those elements of power and control is what, really stands out to me in terms of contextualizing that within the broader definition of gender-based violence. The survivors of FGMC have had they've had no control over their bodies, over what happens to them. And also I see similarities in cultural norms and practices which support this practice. And again, I'm thinking about, when I'm working specifically within the Muslim community and survivors, sort of ideas that it's okay for the men in the household to use physical violence, for example, and the wife's role is being very passive. What also stood out to me in that context is where you know, the mother of a survivor didn't really have much control. And in one of the videos, you know, it mentioned that the survivor was angry with their mother, even though it was the father's side of the family that had, you know, been instrumental in the FGMC. So that's really what's come through to me. And hence my question about what type of support is available for survivors. I do run support groups for the survivors that I'm currently working with, and I'm curious as to anyone in that group may have experienced FGMC. As I put in the chat, you know, I'm not quite sure how to broach a topic like that one-on-one, but I'm thinking, you know, it's something that maybe could come up in group conversation. And so if there's a need for a support group, for example, you know, I would be very interested in providing that type of support. So thank you again for, you know, this program. It was really beneficial.
Can I respond to Neelam about the support groups? Neelam, yes, great. That's a very wonderful idea, and we need more support groups. And I want to say that that's an example of training and technical assistance that we can provide through this project as well. So we are aware of a few other organizations across the country, not in Washington State that I'm aware of, unless anyone else is aware of a support group in Washington State, but a few others that we know that have catered to FGMC survivors. And so that they could potentially be a resource to you to understand how they've structured their support groups and what they've found to be helpful and challenging when discussing FGMC. And I will mention another tool that SEO is currently working on, and we've been working on for the past year, is a community engagement toolkit. And part of that toolkit, we've been interviewing organizations from across the country that are working on FGMC and really learning and understanding how their programming is done and how they raise the topic of FGMC within their programs. And it's been interesting to see a few different approaches. And we hope to have that hopefully within the next few months ready that could potentially give ideas around how you could also within an existing support group, for instance, introduce that topic. So there are resources and definitely an example of what we can share and we can potentially support with through this project with Washington State too. So thank you for bringing that up. And I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maria. That's really useful information. And I look forward to, you know, this toolkit coming out. I'm sure it'll be a really useful resource.
Thank you, Neelam. Thank you, Maria, for highlighting that. And thank you, Neelam, for your question as well, and for showing your support in, especially with regard to support groups for survivors of FGMC. Please feel free to unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I have a question. I think I asked this question when we met in Seattle. Was it in Seattle on April the 23rd? And I think I have been working in communities where FGM is very pervasive. I work in areas I'm from Gambia, and I work in districts that FGM is a big pride. Communities dance, and as Ami Kujabi saw it on our audio, it's perfectly like that, even probably more pervasive like that. So I know that I know a little bit about it. So the question that I asked the last time, or a suggestion, was that we need to probably include the people that actually the cutters themselves or the grassroots that are involved into this. I'm sure there have been people in the past who did this and they regret it and they kind of gave up and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I've learned that this is very invasive and this is very very abusive. So involving the grassroots, the people that actually are the cutters and the people that have been involved, not only the survivors. I think that also helps, especially if we are working on designing policies and programs to stop this process. I think we need to hear from them and see how best we can use their experience and how best we can use what they know to help us design policies and design programs to stop FGM.
And thank you, Mamadou, for that intervention or question. Maria Kathleen Aries, you want to highlight on that point?
I'll just say thank you. I think that's helpful information, and we will definitely take note of that. I think that's information, and I remember you saying that on April 23rd as well. And so if anybody else has any thoughts or ideas about who we should engage or who we should involve in this project, please let us know, because that's what we're trying to collect and, you know, seek your feedback on. So please let us know, and we can yeah, we're taking those notes, and we're
Yeah.
yeah.
Just want to emphasize how important this is, because I've done a lot of community development NGO work back in Gambia. And sometimes you go to a community, you think they need people go to the stream. They walk like 5 miles to go look for water, fetch water, bring it to the village, and that's what they want to do. You tell, oh no, these people need pipe-borne water. You dig boreholes, you run pipes through everybody's household, and they leave it there. They still go to the pond to get some water. You wonder what happened. I thought they need clean water, potable clean water. Now the water is everywhere. There's, you can just turn on the tap and water runs, and people don't use the water. They go all the way again. They go to the 5 miles away from the village to go to that pond, sit down, spend some time, and fetch water and bring it to the village. What we didn't know that there was a good reason why they did that. They wanted to get away, go have their own time. This is women, have their own women time, talk about their husband, talk about their family problems, talk about their marriage issues, and kind of discuss and see how they can help each other out. Kind of support groups. So we didn't really understand what was the problem. We thought the problem was they don't have water, so we gave them what we thought they needed. But they didn't need that. They needed time for themselves to go away from everybody and talk about things they cannot talk about in the presence in the presence of their husbands. They cannot talk about these things in the presence of the village elders and stuff like that. So it's better to involve the grassroots and really see their perspective and see how best they can help us to resolve this. I'm actually driving from there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Risho, I saw your hand up. You want to share something?
Yes, I would like to invite Mamadou or any member from the West African, Washington West African Center to join the advisory committee, because your voice is needed there as well to shape the direction of how we can do the outreach in the communities that you mentioned. We are aware of, but would be great if you are also part of the decision making and the planning. So I extend the invitation to you to join the advisory committee.
Yeah, actually, I received an email, and I was working on the email to register myself and Pa Osman. I've just haven't finished it, but I will get that done. And thank you. I'm sorry for taking people's time.
No, we're here for a discussion too. I just wanted to add in that I think we all agree with you around this work that we're doing needs to be informed by individuals with lived experiences in communities where it's practiced. I think it very much we are working towards that and creating this advisory committee as well, but also recognizing that we need many different sectors to work together. So that includes communities, impacted individuals, but also includes obviously state agencies, and includes folks that work in education and healthcare and social work too. So we're really looking in gender-based violence. So we're really looking at how to build an advisory committee that can help us really think about the systems in this organizations and the programming that can happen. So yes, just wanted to mention that all of us, the partners, have definitely been talking about that too. But thank you for that.
Thank you, Maria. So we have just 5 minutes to go. So if you still have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you can email us at any time, and we will attend to your questions if you email us your questions. Now that we are running against time, we are launching a final poll. As mentioned, we will be sharing the slides so you can access the links. Sorry for that. So we are launching the last poll to gauge any changes in understanding over the topics covered today. If you look at the chat also, we have an evaluation form. We welcome any feedback on what you liked or didn't like to improve our future trainings. So the poll is launched. We will give about 2 minutes to have your feedback.
Nasato, while we're doing that, is it okay if I see Mona, you would answer? Maybe you can be the last person to share something, since I know we're out of time.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't have anything to say. I love it. I love what you guys doing. It's even though I'm very versed in this subject, it touched me. All the videos. This is a great job we're doing, but I want to bring to your attention that even before we reach to who we can collaborate with, and we need to engage the community, and we need to put in mind that few of us worked on this, but we need to get the communities affected excited. The communities that whoever is providing services for these communities, clinicians, teachers, therapists, we have a huge benefit when we network in this way, and the dot will connect when we show them what we did and who's representing this work and why we're doing this work, and this is the law. So I think we need to just a little bit add to engage the communities and people who servicing these communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. So we can go ahead and launch the poll. Or is it already launched, Iris? Okay, we'll give 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think we also have a resource slide we can show if we want to go to the next. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll be able to share a copy of the slides too, so you can click on the actual links here, but that way you can take a look at what some of these might be.
Yeah. And we are also sharing a document in the chat which outlines many more resources you might be interested, that addresses various aspects and conversations around FGMC, tools for supporting survivors and FGMC prevention. Next slide, please. So here we are. We just want to say thank you to all of you for your time in joining us and in joining us for this training. And we look forward to continuing these conversations. We will share, it's already shared in the chat, more, if you want to know more about the organizations involved in this project, please feel free to reach out and learn more. And we are open, we have our email, we are open to further continuing this conversation. So thank you everyone.
Thank you, Asadwan team. Great job.
Thank you all.